Hey, Kevin, you want to corral everybody out in the hallway? Rod Severn. Mr. Severn, how are you, sir? Montrose, how are you? Get them two separate ones. And I'll introduce you. I think we have. You know where you're at in the program, right?
I don't, but well, oh, done. There we go. Sounds good.
Yeah. So I'll put, my brother's done. I'll make a few remarks about him.
Yeah.
And
I plan on staying with it.
yeah, okay, excellent. So this is Vanna White here.
Good to see you.
Okay, we're going to get started here in just a minute. I see Bob Thayer still standing. Shh. All right, we ready to get this thing rolling? Is it 4 o'clock yet? Top of the hour? How's everybody doing? Once again, it just, the years go by, and every year it just seems like this thing just comes faster and faster, but it's great to see all the Montrose faces, all the beautiful faces, all the friendly faces. Always reminded about how amazing this community is, and people get together and do this, right? Honor the visitors, folks that have been so consequential to the Montrose community. So I'm going to welcome everybody. Super exciting to get together again. You know, Jill and I my wife Jill and I don't know where she's at, but she's here. There she is, over there. You know, we're driving up here the other day, right? And we're excited to be here, come in, and, you know, we used to kid about our parents parking their campers over here, you know, in the yard. Go, look at all those, you know, old fogies parking their campers out there, sitting around having what they call a great time. And then here's Jill and I, you know, we're out there in our camper, sitting around having a great time. So it's just kind of fun to... But, you know, the thing that we get across the Michigan line and we see these fields of corn, and we're reminded just how sweet and succulent, you know, Michigan corn is. It's really tasty. And you know, Florida, we live in Florida. Florida has great oranges, but our corn is at best, right? It's horrible. Okay, I got a thumbs up over there. Florida corn, not very good, right? But then about 20 seconds across the state line, you know, all of a sudden the car's shaking and the roads are beat up and everything. We're bobbleheads and we're wishing we were wearing, you know, support undergarments, you know, and we're reminded, you know, of Michigan roads. So, I mean, two ends of the spectrum, right? Corn and Michigan roads. But we're really glad to be here. Anyways, we're here and we made it. without the support undergarments. Anyways, I guess at this time, if the folks in the booth are ready, I'm going to have everybody stand. If you're wearing a cap, remove your cap, and we're going to play our national anthem. We have a flag right here, stage right. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Thank you, Chrissy. She wanted her 15 seconds of fame, so I let her jump in there. So we're going to call our keynote speaker to the stage, which incidentally happens to be my younger brother, Kevin. Now I'm going to tell you, Kevin, come on up. Before you, on your way up here, I want to let you know that if you say anything, if you roast me, I'm going to tell Mom, okay? And you'll probably spend more time in timeouts than you ever have, like probably up to 4 minutes. So here we go. I'd like to introduce my brother Kevin, keynote speaker.
Oh boy, always following my brother my entire life. So anyway, truly an honor and a privilege to be here today and to speak to all of you, especially the inductees. Just a fantastic afternoon. As your keynote speaker, I want to talk about this thing called the Hall of Fame. What's the point? But first, I need to address the elephant in the room. Why am I the one speaking here today? I have no claim to fame. I'm known as the Dean brother that didn't wrestle. So you might say my claim to fame is more by association. I'm the brother of studious football coach Noel Dean. I also happen to be one of the first people in the world to motivate tenacious brother David Dean to improve his wrestling technique. We called it fighting back then. It wasn't until later we realized there was a cool name you could give to it called wrestling. Also happened to play, well, I didn't really play. I sat the bench on the Alma College football team that Dennis Reinhardt was at, another guy by the name of Anise, and other claims to fame. I was on the student council with Coletta, okay, and ate a lot of pizza with Kevin Briggs. So there you go. I did have my 15 minutes of fame, though. I was the captain and quarterback of the very first Montrose football team that made the state playoffs back in 1981 when it was difficult to do that. Only 8 teams in each class, and there were only 4 classes, so if you're doing the math, only 32 teams in the entire state made it. Also had 5 school records for about 15 seconds until a guy by the name of Scott Aldred came and smashed them to pieces a couple years after that. But here I am speaking, not someone deserving fame, but someone observing fame. So I want to talk about Hall of Fame. What's the point? Tell you what it means to me. This hall highlights our role models, our local heroes, to tell their stories so the next generation can copy the things that work for them and apply them to their lives, their families, their careers, their communities. We didn't have a Hall of Fame when I was growing up, but we still had role models, still had heroes. Some were coaches like Coach Hayes, Coach Gronke, Coach Castile. Some were teachers, Mr. Rich, Mr. Bowen, Mrs. Curry. My dad was an obvious and first role model for me for a lot of different reasons, but in sports, he happened to be captain of the Alma College football team in 1959. And so for those of you that know mine and Steve's mom, she exaggerates a lot. She used to tell these exaggerated stories about his exploits at Alma, and we knew we were going to play football. I was also at the Grayling High School football games as soon as I could walk. We lived in Grayling before we came to Montrose. And I'd hear the announcer rattle off the players' names when they'd make a great tackle or when they'd make a great catch or a touchdown. And they became my role models. And I knew I wanted to be like them and match their style and their work ethic. And so we moved to Montrose my freshman year, and I would study the Friday night football program. I don't know if you guys still do that or not, but that's where the school records were listed. And the record for most tackles was a guy by the name of Dennis Reinhardt. And I looked at that record, and I'm like, I'm never going to be able to beat that. I'm not even going to try. But the record for touchdown passes thrown was only 7 at the time. And I thought, that's less than 1 per game. I ought to be able to do that. So that's where I set my sights. So I felt like I had great role models. The stories I learned from them, I observed from them, kept coming back to things like teamwork, goal setting, and preparation. So I want to share a little bit about the things that I observed and how I applied those at Montrose and later in life. So starting with goal setting, one I can personally attest to. As juniors in 1980, our football team had just 2 wins. And as seniors, we were picked to take 6th in our league in 1981. And that didn't feel right. And the leaders of our team sat down in the off season and said, we're going to do something different. We're going to be great. And we set our sights on the league champ, but we also said, let's win the state. And we didn't, but it was that commitment that we had. We even, a few of us, I won't say who, painted 1981 football champs on the sidewalk outside the and like music and writing. Health to me is a super important one because if you don't have health, too much. I still have goals in other areas like sports, which for me fits mostly in my fun and travel category. And in the past couple of years alone, I've sailed the islands of Croatia, I've dove in the British Virgin Islands, run half Ironman events, went barracuda fishing in the Keys. And just a month ago, my wife and I, sitting down here in front, Annette, rode our bikes 500 miles across Iowa in 100-degree heat, which sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it? Anyway, it was. But they say, the RAGBRAI, yeah, see, semi-famous, I guess. But they say, a goal without a plan is just a wish, so I want to talk a little bit about preparation and some of the things I observed. My very first week in Montrose was 1978, and my older brother, Steve, dragged me to this basement out on Lake Road to lift weights. A guy by the name of Stuyvesant let us use his weights. And I remember looking out there, and there were 10 or 15 guys that were all just working super hard at weights, and the coach wasn't even there. And I was like, what in the world are they doing? They're doing it. The coach isn't even there to tell them to do it. And I was just amazed at that. I was also amazed that the little recipe that they had, if you do so many reps at so many weights, that you could see your max improve, week over week. And it was just amazing to me that you kind of had that immediate feedback loop. It was a novel approach, I think, then. It's not a novel approach now, pretty much taken for granted. Observed a lot of other forms of preparation. The off-season work of pole vaulters like Jeff Swanson. The commitment to learning the techniques by the girls' teams in the class of 1981 that pretty much took first in every sport they were in. The long-distance runners like Cindy Reinhardt and Dan Clark, James Axtell, who put in those long, lonely hours out on the gravel roads on the cold and rainy Sundays. So now fast forward. My takeaway from that is to break the 9 goal areas I have in life down into detailed action plans And I work on all those things, you know, the mental and physical preparation, learn techniques, acquire tools. Take music as an example. I play around 50 gigs a year. It's in 3 different bands. Not a full-time job, but certainly a hobby I take seriously. I've got detailed plans in music around the things I need to learn, like banjo, believe it or not, I'm learning. Playing the harmonica, you know, new types of equipment that I need, learning new kinds of songs and social media and all those things. And you know, the old saying about old dogs and new tricks, well, it's a lie. I've learned more, been retired for 3 years, I've learned more in the past 3 years in music than I did in the first 50 years of my life playing. So that's great. I'm not a one-man band. Maybe the more important thing in life is to have a team and to work around a team. So teamwork, my football team in 1981, I thought had some awesome teamwork, and I like to think we inspired a group of folks that were in 8th grade at the time, which would be the class of 1985, well, sorry, class of 86, but in 85 they were a great football team. My brother Noel was on that team. They had a lot of other great athletes like Aldred, Easton, Wixon, Wilson, Dominy. But it was their approach as a team that I think that really stood out and was impressive. And they had a motto, 44 brothers can't be beat. And they lived that motto. Weren't beat. Wrestling also got a lot of folks connected to wrestling here in Montrose. Montrose to some seems like an individual sport. You're out there alone in the arena. You're stuck with your own element of stamina. You're nagged by your own self-doubt. Many of the names are famous in Montrose. You know, the Severns, the Palettis, the Silvas. Sanders, Wilhelm, Bell, Murdoch, that pushed each other in the crab crawls on Sunday nights, that challenged each other, you know, each week in the weight classes, that sat in their plastic sweats in the cafeteria, dripping pounds of sweat into that plastic, eating that solitary orange. But teamwork in life. We all have teams, whether work, friends, or family. My bands are excellent examples of teamwork, I think. Every member has their strength, their gift, musically or otherwise, that they bring to the team. And we all hold each other accountable, and we all celebrate wins and successes together. Those are all things I think that, you know, have echoes from my sports experience here at Montrose. Also, my partnership with my lovely wife, Annette, is another example. She was a class of Montrose 1983, cheerleader, shy girl in the back of the yearbook, class. Over the years, we've been teammates in parenting and where and how we should live, in traveling and experiencing life like that 500-mile bike ride across Iowa in the 100-degree heat. Mundane things like critiquing my speech. So now I'll wrap up. I've touched on the why the Hall of Fame matters to me, to recognize role models and to tell their stories, to inspire kids, to identify and improve life skills like goal setting, preparation, and teamwork. Montrose has had hundreds of great people over the years, most of whom won't end up in the Hall of Fame. The wrestlers in the plastic sweats, the long-distance runners on the rainy Sundays, the guys on the front line of the 1981 football team on the last play of that double overtime game at the end of the season. Guys with names like Gall, Zagrodny, Griswold, O'Mara, Sanders, many unsung heroes. But today we're going to crank it up a notch. We have a gift to hear the stories of the cream of the crop, 4 individuals, role models that set themselves apart. The Paletti brothers, whose work ethic was notorious, and along with the other famous wrestling families of Montrose, the Severns, the Silvas, etc., inspired our dad to pick up his 6 kids and move from Grayling to Montrose in 1978 to be part of that. John Kraviak, who had a remarkable career in the Navy nuclear program. John Newcomer, with his distinguished career in the fire department and long list of community activity and service with the Boy Scouts and other organizations. So it's on behalf of the community, as an observer, I'd like to congratulate each one of them here this afternoon. Sure, they made their name in sports, but their legacy is way more than that. Their stories inspire us all to live life to its fullest. Thank you.
Kevin, I'd like to cue the Kevin Dean and family highlight video for the folks in the booth.
The keynote speaker for the 2023 Montrose Sports and Community Hall of Fame induction ceremony is Kevin Dean. Kevin is a 1982 graduate of Hill McCloy High School. He played 4 years of football and track and dabbled in other sports. He was the president of the student council, salutatorian of his class, and captain quarterback of the 1981 football team that was the first Montrose team to make the playoffs. Kevin received a Bachelor of Arts from Alma College in 1985.
Jane, Robert and Carol, now deceased, Betty, and Mary Lou. He created a loving fondness for one another. He attended required many trips downtown. If he was going downtown, I always wanted to go with him, said his daughter Janine. Styrofoam cups would fall out of the truck, she laughed. The father-daughter bond went so much deeper. He taught me to be independent, she said. He passed on many of his handyman and household skills to me. I'm not afraid to try something. If something breaks, I'll fix it. But more importantly, there was never a moment I didn't know he loved me. There's no better testimony than a child professing their love for a parent. Working at Lyman's Hardware in downtown Montrose as a teenager in the 1950s and shortly coming home from the military helped him to develop valuable handyman skills and an aptitude to fix things. He was a natural John of all trades. He completed his General Electric course and became certified to sell and fix appliances. He worked at Windrush Trailer Supplies on Elms Road in M57 and eventually became the owner. He operated his own heating and cooling business for 40 years. His knack for repairing and installing heating and cooling units became well known in the Montrose community and was often called upon by family members and friends to come take a look at this. He also bought and remodeled homes as a side hobby. He was patient and calm and had a natural gift to teach others and pass on his talents. John enjoyed traveling to his cabin in Hale, Michigan, and spending time with his family, and in later years with his grandchildren, Chrissy, JC, Mackenzie, Griffin, Ethan, Emma, and Christopher. He generously opened up his cabin to family and friends and hosted family reunions, picnics, and 4th of July celebrations. John served the New Covenant Church in Clio for 40 years and was always, once again, fixing things. He served as head usher, set up for funerals, made and served the coffee and lemonade for every funeral for years. He came early every Sunday to open up the doors and greet people. The children loved him and called him Papa John. Pastor Dan Schinnebacher said he always wanted to see the church growing. He was faithful to attend Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. He faithfully served the Montrose Fire Department for 45 years as a firefighter, as an EMS first responder, then retired as fire chief. He was known for his extensive vintage firefighter memorabilia collection that centered on the service of a fireman. John made quite the memorable impression on his first call in 1973. Before cell phones and pagers, there were ringtones on landline telephones which signaled there was a fire. Volunteer firefighters would answer their phones, talk to dispatch, and then race to the fire hall. The first to arrive would sound the siren and alert the community. He was wearing jeans, moccasins, and a lightweight jacket, recalls Jay. He didn't have any equipment on. He just jumped in the truck and went to fight the fire in the middle of winter. His passion was unstoppable. After fires were fought, eating donuts and drinking coffee at Dee's Bakery became a tradition for the firefighters. Walt Hammond, the bakery owner, always saved the misfit donuts for the guys, said Jay. For decades, John got up early to cook hundreds of pounds of chicken for the annual community firemen's picnic. He was proud to get all the chickens, salt them, and put them in a box to marinate. And honestly, it was some of the best chicken you'd ever have, said Jay. Watching their dad get up at all hours of the night to respond to a fire or an emergency or leave Christmas parties in a hurry to get to the fire hall made an impact on them. There were several Christmases we had to wait for him to get back from a fire before opening gifts, said Janine. The impression on his son Jay was deep, since he would follow in his father's footsteps and become a firefighter, then eventually a police officer. The father and son duo served alongside one another as firefighters for 5 years. He was truly dedicated to the fire department. It was his passion, said Jay. He taught me my work ethic in life and through the fire department. For many years, John used the fire hose to pour water on the ice skating rink, which was located near the senior center. I remember going in the middle of winter to spray it down, said Jay. Jeff shares adjectives to describe his father, who served as a Boy Scout leader for 35 years. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, reverent. These are the Scout laws and the very foundation my father lived. 5 decades of John's life was dedicated to the Montrose Masonic Lodge, widely known to make men better. John Newcomer was the backbone of the Masonic Lodge, said Charles Persons, former master of the lodge and treasurer. He kept an eye on everything and made many improvements. He was a pillar of our organization. John is considered one of the founding members of the Montrose Blueberry Festival, which he served 35 years. He built and fabricated the cast iron pancake griddles, which is still used today to flip pancakes. He welded the frames and put turn legs on them, said Jay. He added the grill plates and drilled holes for the pipes and oil containers. Lifelong friend and Blueberry Festival volunteer Connie Tripp said, "It was always husbands and wives and families that hung out together that were part of organizing and enjoying the Blueberry Festival. John and Jeannie were definitely a major part of that. The Wagon Wheels Camping Club they belonged to brought in many campers, and they promoted the Blueberry Festival at highway rest areas and campgrounds. That's partly how it grew. John served 2 terms as president, and he and his wife were recognized as grand marshals. It seemed like they were always making yearly floats at our house," said Janine. "They were working on the floats, using snowmobile trailers, and pulling the Blueberry Queen around. John also helped stake out the campsites for Blueberry campers, and his children helped place 200 stakes in the ground." John dedicated his life to serving his country, his family, his friends, and the community of Montrose until the age of 81. When he peacefully passed away on his birthday, October 18th, 2019, John left a footprint on the Montrose community and is deeply missed. So please help us welcome John Newcomer into the Montrose Sports and Community Hall of Fame.
Beautiful, beautiful tribute. I'd like to ask Jeff, Janine, Jay, Jean to come to the stage to say a few words, also accept a plaque commemorating your father and his contributions to the community. Come on up. Just hand it to me. First, I want to thank the committee, of course. All of you, thank you for nominating my father. Kevin, thanks for all that you do too. Lisa, thank you. Thank you for writing the beautiful stuff that you do about that, even as eulogy and even here. Thank you so much. We love you. Way of thinking, sometimes I think that once I get to heaven, I'll understand this a little bit better, hopefully, but when I get to heaven, I want to think that God now, as we speak, is calling Dad over, saying, look what's happening. From wonderful things that my father has done, so he can look how he served, was very fond and very wonderful for our Father God. In Matthew 5:16, he talks about letting your light shine so that the Heavenly Father can be glorified. My father loved to serve. My father absolutely loved doing the things for this community. He did it while Mom stayed home and took care of the kids and took care of us. And I think we turned out pretty doggone good because of Mom's hard work at home and what Dad did as far as the community was concerned. I loved going out and doing things, going to the Blueberry Barn and doing things with Dad. We all did it. We loved being involved in our church, and from this day, from that day when I saw my parents do that, I'm involved heavily in my church because that's what we saw. So not only has my dad passed on or do what he's done, he's passed it on to our generation as well. I'll wrap up with this. A great man once said, integrity is defined by doing things when no one is looking. Father did a lot of that. He loved this community. He loved you. He worked very hard to serve this community. I want to thank you very much for this. It is an honor to be next to the one and only Mr. Tripp and Mrs. Tripp as well. We appreciate and love you. Thank you.
Chrissy. Beautiful. You know, I had the pleasure of knowing Mr. Newcomer. We moved here, as my brother said, in 1978. He was just a genuine, humble, helpful man who was always there if he needed something. And I know our family benefited from his generosity. So he's missed, and this is a beautiful tribute to him. Soon, we'll be calling up Mr. Kraviak to the stage. We're going to see a video first. I think many know that Don has multiple degrees and that he could make a bunk bed to naval standards in 12 seconds. So not many know that Don knows how to set a yoke. And honestly, I don't know what that means, but I'm sure he'll explain when he gets up here. So if you could cue the Don Kraviak video, please.
Don Kraviak is the recipient of the Special Achievement Award for the Montrose Sports and Community Hall of Fame Class of 2023 for his accomplishments during his long career in the naval nuclear industry. Don is a 1974 graduate of Hill McCoy High School. He grew up in a house near the corner of Francis and Seymour Roads and spent his early years playing in the woods and fields along Brent Creek and the Flint River. Some of his fondest memories were riding his bike back and forth to town to play Little League Baseball during the summer. His favorite summer job was the summer he worked for the Montrose Township Summer Recreation Program. Alongside his future brother-in-law, Dwayne Cherry, lining Little League fields, umpiring baseball games, teaching kids to play t-ball, and chaperoning on the weekly bus trips to the Chesaning Pool. Don demonstrated his athleticism during all 4 years of high school by participating in football, wrestling, and track for Montrose. He served as co-captain of the football team during his senior year and led the team in scoring at running back, which earned him accolades for first team all-conference. His wrestling team finished second in the state his senior year and may have won the state title had it not been for a tragic auto accident on the way to a Saturday meet that claimed the life of his friend, Stuart Curry, and sidelined several other starters. In track, Don was a member of a group of sprinters that broke most of the Montrose school records for the short distances, including a 440-yard relay team that placed in the state final. Don personally set a new Montrose school record for the 100-yard dash. As a result of his contributions in 3 sports, Don was named Montrose's overall outstanding boy athlete his senior year. Don was equally involved in other aspects of high school, being active in the National Honor Society and served as president his senior year. He was a member of the publications class responsible for producing the yearbook and worked the sports beat, writing articles for the Rampage High School newspaper. Don was also selected to represent Montrose High at Michigan's Boys State, a week-long conference held at Michigan State University, where high school students from around the state came together to learn about government by forming a government, nominating candidates, holding a political convention, and electing officials. Don finished high school near the top of his class and was the top male academically. He also had the distinction of winning the American Legion School Award all 6 years of junior high and high school. That award was granted annually to one boy and one girl in each grade for their demonstration of leadership, scholarship, and service. His fellow classmates were spot on when they voted Don as most likely to succeed his senior year. After graduation, he shifted his focus entirely to academics when he decided to study engineering at Michigan Technological University in the frozen north of the Upper Peninsula. He picked tech not only for its great engineering programs and elaborate ice sculptures, but because it appealed to his sense of adventure. It seemed far away, and Don had never been there before. He worked his way through college, holding part-time jobs the entire time in school, and sometimes multiple jobs during the summers. Even then, he was looking for adventure. One of his most interesting summer jobs was working for the Civil Defense Emergency Management Organization in North Dakota, evaluating buildings for their possible use as fallout shelters. As part of that job, he got to tour military installations and got his first exposure to the defense industry and nuclear technology. Don graduated from Michigan Tech with high honors in the top 10% of his class. He had planned to go directly to graduate school, but was convinced by a recruiter from the Bettis Atomic Power Laboratory in Pittsburgh to start working and let Bettis put him through graduate school. It was an exciting time to join Bettis during a race to develop better technology for our Navy's ships at the height of the Cold War with the Soviets. Because the job required a government security clearance, the recruiter couldn't tell him much about the work, just that he would be serving the Navy and the nation. That made it seem all the more appealing to Don. Besides, he had never been to Pittsburgh. After moving to Pittsburgh and starting to work full-time, he continued his education attending graduate school at Carnegie Mellon University and completed a master's degree in mechanical engineering over the next several years. Don worked at the Naval Nuclear Laboratory for 43 years. The Naval Nuclear Laboratory comprises the U.S. Department of Energy locations and personnel responsible for developing advanced naval nuclear propulsion technology, providing technical support to ensure the safety and reliability of our nation's naval nuclear reactors, and training the sailors who operate those reactors in the U.S. Navy's submarines and aircraft carrier fleets. Their mission is dedicated solely to the support of the U.S. Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program. The Naval Nuclear Laboratory includes the Bettis Atomic Power Laboratory in Pittsburgh, the Knowles and Kesselring sites in New York, and the Naval Reactors Facility in Idaho, which have proudly supported the nation since 1946. The Naval Nuclear Laboratory has nearly 8,000 employees working at primary locations in Pennsylvania, New York, South Carolina, and Idaho. The Naval Nuclear Laboratory also has an established presence at numerous shipyards and vendor locations around the globe. Don's initial work at the Bettis Laboratory in Pittsburgh was in support of the operating fleet, providing technical support for new ship construction and the refueling of naval nuclear reactors in aircraft carriers and submarines. A little over a year out of college, he volunteered to take a field assignment working out of the Bettis Field office in the shipyard in Newport News, Virginia, monitoring the refueling of a ballistic missile submarine. Because he was the youngest engineer there, he was assigned to the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Late one night during a complex maintenance evolution, something went clunk. At that moment, he got a full appreciation for the responsibility and expectations the shipyard and Navy personnel had of a Bettis engineer when everyone in the room turned and looked at him. Over the next several years, his assignments included numerous trips to shipyards and naval bases around the country to work on problems involving submarines and aircraft carriers. The places he visited included Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in New Hampshire, Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia, Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Washington, and Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard in Hawaii, to mention a few. On one occasion, he was asked to travel to Australia to do testing on board the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, as it was transiting through the Indian Ocean to the Philippines. A highlight from that trip was that he was observing the ship's flight tower when the crew celebrated 25 years of operation under nuclear power by spelling out E equals MC squared, 25, on the flight deck while in their dress white uniforms. After several years in Pittsburgh, Don was looking for a new adventure and accepted a challenge to move 2,000 miles west and work at the Naval Reactors Facility in Idaho. At the time, the Naval Reactors Facility housed 3 operating prototype reactors that were used for the dual mission of testing new technology and training sailors. Later, Don became a trainer for the classes of sailors that followed. Among his students at the Nuclear Power Training Unit in Idaho were some of the senior officers that would be the next captains and executive officers of the Navy's aircraft carriers. After several years in Idaho, Don returned to Pittsburgh, where he met and married the love of his life, Mary Ellen. They have been married for over 36 years. Mary Ellen even got the opportunity to take a day cruise on board the aircraft carrier USS George Washington, where she stood on the flight deck and watched a fighter jet do touch-and-go landings. Over his career, Don rotated through various engineering and management positions, supporting ongoing operations, and worked on the development of new technologies for naval reactors. This sometimes involved working with researchers at universities, as well as scientists and engineers at other national laboratories. His work took him to several other Department of Energy sites, including Sandia National Laboratory in New Mexico, the Nevada Nuclear Test Site, and the Hanford Reservation in Washington State. As a result of his technical work, he received a number of company innovation awards and was awarded 2 patents. Highlights from those days range from adopting the latest simulation technology to training reactor plant operators to running scale model tests of new design concepts for nuclear spent fuel shipping systems. Over time, Don was promoted into more senior leadership positions and eventually decided to accept another challenge. This time, the adventure involved his family when he moved Mary Ellen and his 4 small children from Pennsylvania to Idaho. There he was the engineering manager and eventually the plant manager at the Expended Core Facility, the Naval Nuclear Laboratory's spent nuclear fuel processing complex at the Idaho National Laboratory site. As the plant manager, he managed over 400 engineers, scientists, technicians, and crafts personnel. After returning to Pittsburgh the second time, Don held a number of senior management and executive level positions, including leading a department responsible for the developing and deploying new naval operator training techniques in control room simulators. He also served as the chief information officer for the organization. As CIO, Don had overall responsibility for the central scientific computing systems, distributed computing operations, computer security, telecommunication systems, and data center operations for all of the naval nuclear laboratory sites. During the final years of his career, Don ran the project management office, monitoring the work involved in the design and construction of a new billion-dollar naval spent fuel handling facility that would replace the one he previously worked at in Idaho. This work required frequent trips to Washington, D.C. to brief senior government officials and naval personnel. After 43 years of service, Don retired in 2021. This picture was given to him at retirement to acknowledge his accomplishments in years of service. The commemorative coins are awarded for each 5-year anniversary. The last one reads, 40 years of service supporting the world's best Navy. Don currently lives with his wife Mary Ellen in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. They have one son, Matthew, and 3 daughters, Kara, Catherine, and Leah. Since retirement, in addition to spending time with his grandchildren, Jonathan and Eileen, Don has been working on his golf game, was recently selected to be a member of the Parish Pastoral Council for his church, and offers his time to various other volunteer endeavors. Please help us welcome Don Kraviak into the 2023 Montrose Sports and Community Hall of Fame for the Special Achievement Award.
Tell you, I'm more than a little humbled by this honor, getting this achievement award. I want to thank the committee. Especially want to thank Brenda Woodward. It's terrific videos. I think that they really make the show, so to speak. And I thought there might be a test, this set the yoke. I don't know if there are any naval personnel here, but basically that's setting the yoke is when you essentially button down the hatches, close all the unnecessary openings, and prepare for rough seas or warfare. So it's a naval term. So I guess I passed the test. When you prepare for something like this, you find yourself looking back and thinking a lot about how you got here. Out old scrapbooks and yearbooks, you reacquaint yourself, or you run into some old friends, which I've done a little. You reflect on how blessed you are, honestly, and most importantly, you think about the people that helped you along the way. I was fortunate enough in high school to have a series of coaches and teachers that honestly saw more in me than I did. Coaches like, and you've heard of some of the names already, Tom Castile and Bob Hayes, who taught us that the path to success required hard work and discipline. Teachers like Frank Fear, who was my drafting teacher, who very early on encouraged me to look into engineering and then kept after me. Another teacher, Judy Thomas, actually an English teacher I had, who was always picking on me because she was forever asking me to speak up in class, and that wasn't necessarily my nature. But it was her methods that she really was trying to teach us to think critically, and encouraged me especially. She used to write notes, basically at the end of papers. I still have one that she wrote on my final paper that senior year. And basically it said, it's great having you in class. Your future looks like you could do a lot of different things. Don't let that strength get lost in mediocrity. And I felt so bad about that, or I had to go see her. I went and saw her and asked her what she meant. And she said, don't forget to use your gifts. Make sure you find something to do that is important to you and serves people. That's the kind of that's the kind of teachers we had. Another one got mentioned actually in the previous video was Dan Schinnebarger. Before he was the minister for that church, he was a teacher in our school system. I had him for math, I think, in junior high. He was also the track coach. And I considered him a mentor in many ways. He used to give me rides home from practice. He helped me get my summer jobs, the one that I mentioned on the video. And he basically told me, aim high but remember to keep balance in your life. And never forget to leave room for God. So, with people like that behind me, I went off to college and honestly did better than I ever expected. Things kind of fell into place. That earned me the position, at least the starting point that I had with the Naval Nuclear Laboratory. And over the years, you know, I worked with a lot of really great people in the Navy, or federal government. And, you know, that organization in particular has a real sense of purpose and obviously a proud history, much like the school does. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that I used to, later in my career, when I was talking to new employees, I would tell them that our real purpose, why, you know, what our job was to ensure that those young men and women operating those power plants and those submarines and aircraft carriers were never in a fair fight. They always had an advantage. And that advantage was better equipment, better training, and better support than the other guys. You know, early on, a lot of it was about technology, about competing with the Soviets, but as I matured in my career, I realized it was really about the people. It was about the people that we were serving, so to speak, and that's what we really consider it. So one of the really good fortunes I had was to meet Mary Ellen, and with her support over all these years, we raised 4 great young people. They're sitting in the second row there for the most part. Looking back, just to conclude with this, looking back, I left Montrose and headed for Pittsburgh. I did. I believed I could do just about anything. People here instilled in me, you know, to work hard, to believe in myself, and to seize opportunities. I will forever be thankful to this community for giving me that confidence. It made all the difference. I really do. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Kraviak. And we certainly, this community is very proud of all the things that you've done and your promotion of safety on the front lines and everything you've done in the Navy. It's awesome. It's an awesome story. It really is. Before we call up the Paletti family, I was asked to read some words. Now, this is from Jerry Silva. Jerry Silva nominated Tony and Mark, knew them quite well. They all wrestled together, did amazing things. You may not know that Tony held the national record for wins in high school. It was then broken by Jerry Silva, who was then broken by his own brother, Gary Silva. So, you know, we've had tremendous success here in the community, the small town of Montrose in wrestling. But Jerry, nonetheless, nominated the Tony and Mark and wanted me to say a few words. He couldn't be here. So his words. I would like to personally thank Tony for the 3 years he yelled in my corner during my matches. He would always encourage not just myself, but everyone that was on the Montrose wrestling team. He would always let you know during your match that you can do this because you work harder than your opponent. If you were his partner in practice, he made you better because he made you work. If you were doing something wrong, Tony would show you the proper way. I truly believe no one does great things or great accomplishments without the help or guidance from other people, like coaches, friends, other opponents, and in this particular case, Tony's older brother, Mark. I know this because Mark was there the whole time to help, encourage, and teach his younger brother, Tony. And I'm very proud to have nominated and to have the Paletti brothers go into the Hall of Fame. So with that, let's cue the Paletti video. Thank you.
Two talented brothers, Mark and Tony Paletti, are being inducted together into the Montrose Sports and Community Hall of Fame class of 2023 for their athletic achievements during high school and college. Just 3 years apart allowed them to run on successful cross-country and track teams together, then excelled on the wrestling mat. Tony, class of 1977, was an extremely successful two-time individual state wrestling champion and became a high school All-American. Mark, class of 1974, developed into a thriving wrestler for Lake Superior State College, where he became an NAIA and NCAA All-American, placing at Division II national tournaments. Tony was a standout wrestler on a team of standout wrestlers. He won more matches in 4 years of varsity wrestling than any other wrestler in the nation had ever accomplished, setting a new national record for 159 wins. Had he not been in the tragic fatal auto collision on February 2nd, 1974, his freshman year, many believe that Tony would have been Montrose's first four-time state champion. That disastrous accident took the life of senior wrestler Stuart Curry that day, and Tony was declared to have less than 50% chance of survival. Stuart's parents were Jack, a Montrose Middle School principal, and Ellen, a Montrose High School English teacher. It was a very dark day in the Montrose community. The Montrose Rams lost 3 starters that day as well: Tony, Mark, and Asa Lavery. Yet they still managed to place second in the state a month later. Tony's record as a freshman was 27-1. He pinned the only guy that beat him the weekend after his loss. Mark Paletti led the team with the most wins and pins before the accident at that point, with a record of 20. Asa Lavery was a 4-year starter and looked like a sure state placer leading up to that accident. Asa was a senior with a 24-5 record at the time of the accident. Tony was on the 1975, 76, and 77 state championship wrestling teams that made history, winning states 3 consecutive years. Tony and Mark were honorary members of the Francis Bentley Genesee County All-Star team in 1974. Tony was still on crutches, but Mark remembers that moment as a highlight of their time together that year on the 74 team. Tony recovered his sophomore year and became a force to be reckoned with by placing 5th at the individual wrestling state tournament. Tony won his first state championship his junior year over 2-time defending state champion John Burdick of Comstock Park in stunning fashion. Mark recalls, "That was the most amazing match I've ever seen to this day, even though Tony had injured his shoulder in the semifinals." Jerry Silva also recalls that moment like it was yesterday. Tony just naturally picked the guy up with his not-so-weak left arm and won his first state championship. He raised his arms in victory, winning his first state championship on his birthday. Tony came back his senior year and won another individual state championship title. Tony also won the Tournament of Champions, where the best in class A, B, C, and D wrestled, and was named on the Detroit News State All-Star First Team for the entire state of Michigan for all classes. He was also named to the high school All-American team. Tony ran with the 1974 cross-country team that placed 3rd in the state, and he pole vaulted for the Rams track team. Tony was also a member of the National Honor Society. In high school, Mark was captain of both the 1974 cross-country team that took 3rd in the state and the 1974 state runner-up wrestling team. He was voted most outstanding wrestler that year as well. The Rams won the league championship during all 4 years of Mark's high school career. Mark was named to the Genesee County All-Star team 3 times and was an honorary member after the accident. Mark also played in the band and was a member of the National Honor Society. He won his first varsity letter as a freshman in track. Mark cut so much weight during high school to get to 98 pounds as a junior. He realized the weight he gained after the accident, even with his mouth wired shut from the broken jaw he suffered, that he didn't care to work at losing weight anymore in college. As a result, he went from a 112-pounder to 142 pounds over the summer before his first year of college. He found a returning D1 national champ, Don Ron, at his new 142 weight class at Clarion State in Pennsylvania. With some confusion over money at Clarion over the Christmas break, he was approached by Jerry Hoffman, the new wrestling coach at Saginaw Valley. Hoffman told Mark that he qualified for financial aid due to his parents being laid off. So Mark picked up his stuff over break and went to Saginaw Valley State. In his first year of eligibility, Mark won the Great Lakes Intercollegiate Conference. Later, he went to NAIA Nationals at Edinburgh, where a coach from Lake Superior said some very kind words. Now with his parents working again, and Saginaw Valley not having wrestling scholarship money, he needed to find money, which led Mark to call Lake Superior coach Jim Fallis to see if they had aid. Mark finally got his full ride to wrestle in college, and he made the most of finishing his undergrad as a Laker. After that, Montrose wrestlers started getting noticed in the college ranks, with Mark's efforts and Dave and Dan Severin's success. Scholarships were being offered without having to enter the transfer portal. Mark said, "I practically invented it, having wrestled at 3 colleges." He also invented a wrestling move in high school that won him college matches, including pinning a future D2 national champ. Interestingly, when Mark later practiced chiropractic in Colorado Springs, he treated the head of the Olympic Wrestling Committee and asked him if he had ever seen the move before. He said no. So we have a move called the Paletti move. In college, Mark placed 5th at NAIA Nationals in 1977 at 142 pounds in Spokane. He was one match away from placing in 1978 at 150 pounds, and then placed 5th in the NAIA Nationals in 1979 in Wheeling, West Virginia. He also was an NCAA 2 All-American at Brookings, South Dakota in 1979, taking 7th place. Mark won Most Valuable Wrestler at Saginaw Valley State and most pins. At Lake Superior State, he was voted Best Student in the Bachelor of Science program, Sports and Recreation Management, and won the Coaches Award for All-Around Athlete in 1979. Tony, after being offered many collegiate scholarships from the likes of Arizona State and the academic Columbia University, brother Mark at Lake Superior State College. The Paletti brothers were the first set of brothers to wrestle for Lake State. Mark graduated from Lake Superior State in 1979 and Life Chiropractic College in 1986. After Tony re-injured his shoulder wrestling in college, he decided to pursue the building trades as a carpenter. Tony and Mark were inspired by their older sister Rose, who was goalie for the Rams speedball team that claimed the league championship and was also on the 1974 girls track team that became Montrose's first state champion team. Their father, Richard, was a 1952 Montrose graduate and was the class salutatorian. The Paletti family consisted of Richard, mother, Mary, oldest, Rose, class of 1974, Mark, class of 1974, Tina, class of 1976, and Tony, class of 1977. The Paletti family were members of the Flint Photography Club and had a darkroom in their garage, which Tony loved. They were also in the Flint Canoe Club. The Paletti family liked the out of doors and camped every summer. They often took weekend road trips to Pinconning to buy cheese and sausage, then continued to Tawas to walk the pier. It was Mr. Paletti's dream to get a sailboat. He could identify all of them as the family walked the pier. His dream later materialized when he bought a sailboat that he kept in Standish and later in Muskegon. Their dad's desire was passed down to both sons, who also got sailboats, motorboats, kayaks, paddleboards, and learned to windsurf. Tony had 8 boats at one point. Mark moved to Muskegon and is a member of the yacht club and keeps a small catamaran there. Mark practiced chiropractic in Toledo, Colorado Springs, and Boulder, Colorado, before moving back to Michigan in 1998. He practiced in East Lansing for over 20 years. He was voted Best Chiropractor in Lansing. Now he does mobile chiropractic with company and home visits. Sadly, Tony lost his life on April 20th, 2018, after a shoulder surgery at the University of Iowa. He left his wife Linda and daughter Sarah, who live in Fairfield, Iowa. Tony was married to Linda in Trinidad, her home country. Sarah attends Fairfield High in Iowa, where she loves acting. Tony loved his boats and loved sailing. He was quite a painter. He used wall mud to paint wild impressions everywhere, including the ceiling. Move over, Michelangelo. Mark has one son, John, age 22, who has applied to the famous Berklee School of Music in Boston. Mark lives in Muskegon and is an avid cyclist. He manages a Facebook page called Sharkless Sea, where he promotes adventure tourism in Michigan, expressing his family's love of nature and photography. He goes by Dr. Michigan. Mark also manages the Montrose Rams Wrestling Facebook group, chronicling the early Ram wrestling program and Coach Tom Castile's teams. He coaches wrestling at East Lansing K-8 My Way. Mark also enjoys making pancakes for the homeless, a venture he undertook during COVID. He also participates in fundraisers and supports the Muskegon Food Pantry. Mark enjoys attending special events with his Lake State coach, Jim Fallis, and former teammates whenever he can. Mark shared that all of this would have been impossible, in fact, unthinkable, had it not been for Coach Tom Castile. Coach Castile could see our potential when we couldn't. I was a 5-foot, 90-pound freshman playing football for Coach Castile. Our team was winless at 0-7. My goals to win a scholarship in sports looked dim at that point. Coach Castile saw my potential, as he did with so many of us, and he recruited us to wrestle. He instilled a work ethic, discipline, relentlessness, and belief that we were special. Coach Castile made his wrestlers believe they could be something great, and many did. Teammate Don Kraviak said before Coach's funeral earlier this year, Coach Castile had us believe we could do far more than we ever believed we could do ourselves. Mark and Tony were at the beginning of the Montrose wrestling program and were part of the meteoric trajectory that saw a fledgling program that started in 1968. They became league champions each year that Mark attended high school. Tony's teams won states 3 consecutive years and placed second the other year. Mark and Tony were foundational to early success of the Montrose wrestling program, leaving their imprint on countless Ram wrestlers who succeeded them. Success in athletics, family, and careers are again a reminder of the strength and spirit of the Montrose community. It is with great pride that we celebrate the Paletti brothers, Mark and Tony, with their well-deserved induction into the 2023 Montrose Sports and Community Hall of Fame.
I'd also like to have Rose and Linda and S and the Pletty family come up here as well, if you'd like. Come up.
Hall of Fame and result of what this community, we're a little city street urchins, free roaming kids. Montrose is a community of people that were riding the wave of FDR, giving people jobs that people could live on. So our parents worked very hard, and often they weren't around much. So as much as worked hard, sometimes 12 hours, sometimes 7 days a week, we played hard. And we could bike ride anywhere. Oh, we could throw senior parties in the Flint River, take the canoe across to the island over there on Wilson Road. And all that, it was a safe place. It was sort of special, and Coach Castile became a surrogate father for many of us. And said street urchins, we were started, believe it or not, at safety, and I could tackle because I tackled shoelaces, and I woke up. I mean, every time I did that, I got stars. I probably had a few concussions. But Coach Castile saw something in us. Said, well, come on out to wrestle. And that's kind of how it started for me and Tony. And Tony was wrestling with me. I started in ninth grade. In sixth grade, we were in the front room of our home wrestling. But back to the Montrose thing, we could ride our bikes anywhere. We rode to Burr. We rode to the old ballpark where we dug up holes and mimicked, wartime procedures. And then we went up to Mrs. Henry and shot bows and arrow. And Don Kraviak, I haven't seen him in 49 years. I remember he would ride his bike Kansas Road to play baseball. Thought we were going to he was going to trademark his extra training program of riding a bike and how it developed him into a serious running back. And bike rides. Don told me he liked fishing. I had no idea he meant nuclear fishing. Had I known that, I would have brought him up to Wassee River before they shut down. We could have done Fishing Square. I want to thank, Brenda. She's been in part of the Hall of Fame forever. Class of '74 was a dynamic time because we had not only the first place team women's track, we had the second place and we had the third place cross country. Someone on the Paletti family was on all those teams. That was a magical time for us. I want to thank Jerry Silva that sort of tricked me into, this all started with us getting Danny inducted in the U.S. He wasn't in the Hall of Fame, so we were all writing letters, Danny Severn. And so in that time period, we found out that Tony wasn't in the Hall of Fame in Montrose, and so Jerry says, I'm going to go do that. And he says, you won 2 championships. So in the midst of that, Jerry thinks he's very cool. Well, Mark, why don't you send some stuff in about what you did to motivate Tony? I got all my details on there too, and then all of a sudden, I told him how we were both inspired by my sister Rose, because as a freshman, I remember coming back from a track meet, and one of the guys, Ed Wiggins, he says, well, your sister's quite an athlete, isn't she? I go, yeah. See, she's in the track Hall of Fame, or the track competition between all the Class A, B, and C, and D, and conference as a freshman. It took me a few years to win a conference. And then speedball, and she was an amazing goalie. So we had her to inspire us as well. So I thought he was going to say something about the takedowns that Tony was so impressive with. Did you tell me that he used to slap his hands and do a forward flip and then do a double leg on you? Was that the... Oh, all right, sorry, Don. Anyway, I hate to steal. Well, that video mostly took all my thunder away, too, because it had all my stuff. But anyway, Tony, he was a fearless guy. I mean, I have a picture of him. This is, that was on the video, too, that he... I've never seen anyone do a double ankle pick in my life, ever, and I've never seen it, and I follow wrestling, and I run into all this Montrose guys, Dave Dean coaching in Michigan State. I watch all these different wrestlers, never seen that. That was how quick Tony was to catch a 2-time defending state champ on both of his heels. Crazy. So then this kid's trying to, come like he's going to get up, and he's trying to escape, and Tony loses one arm of him, but he picks him up with one arm and slams him down hard. And so it was that kid's birthday. He didn't have such a good birthday that day. Also, he's fearless, you know, I mean, he was like a cat, too, in many ways. We almost lost him in '74. In fact, we were told that he was one of the kids that died in the accident. And my sister Tina took that call, so think about how traumatic that was in the family. But he didn't have any fear. He would get on a high dive and do a triple flip, land on his belly, and get up laughing. And oh, I'm going to do that. Another time, he says, well, I'm out skiing at Mount Holly. This is like he's 45 years old. He sees these young kids out there. They're doing flips with skis on. I can do that. So he goes airborne, and he forgets he's got skis on, and he goes hat all the way down on his neck. He says, well, I couldn't feel anything. You know, he goes down, oh, is there a doctor here? And he goes, they go, no. And he goes, well, I'll go home. And he puts sesame oil. He wakes up and he's numb. He goes into the hospital and they go, oh, you got a broken neck, brother. Nature, and he would do these things like he got inspired by a buddy of mine, Rod Russell, class of '74, with his catamaran up in Traverse City. Tony took a Hobie Cat, a highly unstable sailboat, so I think I'll sail it to Sheboygan. He's in Mackinac City. Northeasterly winds are blowing in. Cindy Unsel will know about that. The boat fetching waves in there. Tony's in there hanging onto the boat. He survives, but I mean, we all know the Great Lakes never give up their dead, or at least, you know, so he lived on the always land on his feet, but you know, if you didn't know stories to tell him about Tony, and you know, I guess I'm going to leave it there. You know, I had some good luck with wrestling. It was my life. I was able to get a scholarship finally. You know, we had a crazy time here in Montrose. You know, we had, you know, if I'm going to tell you the story, it's like you won't even believe it, really, because we had like 4 high school All-Americans on the mat at the same time, the same year. Sometimes I think even 5 high school All-Americans. And our coach, you know, we were praying to God at the end of the match, at the end of a practice, and he even gave out we could solicit divine intervention to get us out of the last wind sprints if, and only if, a good enough joke to make him and Coach Hayes laugh. If they did, we got. I had the luck of being Coach Castile, who we just lost him this year, and so many different people. Wrote a letter to us. He, you know, said, you know, he had me open it up at the grave, you know, funeral. He says, you know, tell all the wrestlers that death is no joke. Wind sprints for the lot of you, you know, and that was brutal for us to take. And he said, he also wrote in that note, he said, Paletti, I never asked you to tell a joke because I know you were so damn serious, you know. So by this time, you know, it's going to be wind sprints for a lot of you wrestlers out there. How many wrestlers do we have out here today? Yeah, a lot of them. We got a brotherhood here, you know. The things that got crazy, our coach, he took us from nothing, and I found out you know, I wrestled in Michigan that Montrose went to Freeland in 1968 and won no matches. The coach there felt so bad for us that they taught us some wrestling moves. Then in us win our first league meet with, call him the father of Montrose Wrestling, and John and Paul Dowd were major heroes and hint, hint, should be inducted in the Hall of Fame. They won their last two matches. Paul Dowd, who just passed, and we talked to him and got to know him again. He was the guy that won the last victory, beat Randy Linneman of started winning every year. We won 7 until 1977. So we started getting the interest all around the country. Like, you know, Coach Castile, he was there 16 years, and 9 of the years, remember, he took 0 to nothing to 4 or 5 years, and then 9 of the 11 years later, he was in the top 2 in the nation. So we had, you know, it was like, you know, the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit. There were people coming around, strangers coming around asking questions like, what's going on? How's Montrose doing this, you know? And we had this phenomenal community that was supportive of us. We had a great recreation department. We had, you know, great band. We could swim. We could, had a rocket club for, you know, that was amazing. So then, coaches started flying. I mean, you saw what I had to do to get a scholarship. All right, I went to 3 colleges. All right. After that, it wasn't so doggone hard. You know, my buddy Bob Farr, who visited with Coach, I mean, UCLA. You know, hey, come and play football. You know, Severn boys are all flying to Arizona, and the Silvas, and all these guys are going to Colorado, and Barry goes to Kentucky. We're on the map. And then, of all things, the god of wrestling himself, Dan, Iowa, 15 championships, and he came not to teach a clinic, but to wrestle with us to see what was going on. That's how crazy it was. So I'm glad to be part of that. I know it's the culture here in Montrose. I tried to do this in Arizona, and he said it worked. So it was like perfect timing. You know, a couple, you know, kids were able to get out of Montrose on an athletic scholarship. I wasn't going to make it at 90 pounds. So, and then I don't know how many guys, Bob Grzinski, Sean Murdoch, some of my brothers, so further on, it was a big thing. Montrose was known for wrestling before it was known for that. I mean, I went out and gave Dan Gable a jump rope when I was selling jump rope, and he knew, yeah, I didn't know it should go anywhere. So anyway, I want to thank everyone. I want to, you know, we've got Tony's daughter here, S, and Linda, and Rose. And I want to thank Montrose Hall of Fame, and to tell more stories. One of the things that one of my friends said that or a writer has said that if you tell enough stories about somebody, they never die. You know, they never really die. And I know we have enough stories about the Montrose wrestling program, Coach Castile and Tony Poletti, that they will be immortal. Just, you know, like, you know, the Greek tragedies are great stories. We had our tragedy, you know, Stuart. And I'd like to, I didn't get to go to this. If we wouldn't mind just doing a little silent thing here for Stuart Cruz. And to end with this particular thing, I saw this story. Is anyone, Robin Williams, you know he was a wrestler? Everyone know that? A movie called The Dead Poet Society. And it my heart. He took all the students down to the trophy case of all these guys, and he said, these kids were all just like you know. A lot of hope. Look at them. Just like a lot of them are fodder for worms and fertilizer for daffodils. And he said, listen, carpe diem, carpe diem. That's the message. I think, you know, or for all of us, Stuart in the prime of his life. We've lost so many people lately. I saw Paul Dowd, he was my hero, he's gone. Coach Castille's gone. I lost my brother, I lost my... So you have all these people, live for today and tell some stories and take the time to go see people. I want to... I'm going to close it there, and thank you, Montrose.
I'm gonna tell some stories. You know, when you said, are there any wrestlers here, and hands went up, you know, what I saw is a bunch of people that the Play brothers beat up on. So I'm thinking maybe payback a little bit. And Bob Farr, take note, if you ever get inducted, you know, some of this kind of stuff might come at you, but you know, you saw the Palettis were big into sailing, right? And they had sailboats. Well, there's a story about Mark going out with a banking buddy of his on a sailboat, and the banker falls overboard. Mark grabs a life preserver and goes over to the side of the boat. He's like holding it up. He goes, "Can you float alone?" And his banking buddy looks at him. He goes, "Obviously, but this is a heck of a time to be talking about that." Anyways, you know, a lot of us got beat up by the Palettis. We showed up. The Dean family showed up from northern Michigan in 1978. Really, wrestling in northern Michigan was just a way to deal with bears on the way to the bus stop, okay? And so we come down here, and he talks about a move, and this is true. This part of this is true. His brother would clap his hands, right, Bob? Do the 360, and you were so stunned, he would double leg you down to the mat, and it was just so fast and so abrupt. And so what the Palettis didn't know is that we had developed kind of the I just got my butt beat by the Palettis move. And being that they're Italian, I think they'll understand this, but this is the I just got my butt beat by the Palettis. So I'm going to go into a wrestling stance. I don't know if you saw that or not, Mark, but that might have happened. So, we've got a new installment this year and for every year going forward. But we want to take a moment of silence, and we just want to remember past committee members, past inductees who have since deceased since this started in 2003. So just a moment of silence. Thank you. And some of these very, very recent people that were hugely consequential to our community. So we're closing here. I got a few things. As I've been sitting here, I'm getting notices. This one from our superintendent of schools, Dr. Lyndon Moore. There were a number of items approved recently at the school board meeting, like handbooks, the curriculum guide, hiring of new teachers. One that will be of interest to you is the call for a 0 mil increase bond election on November 7th of this year, 2023.
The bond extension will fund projects to support academics, performing arts, and athletics. The district is looking to increase safety, increase instructional technology, improve teacher workspace, upgrade and add on to the auditorium, and upgrade the athletic complex itself. There will be plenty more information to come on this. We will be seeking your input as we make decisions on the best way to support and serve our community through this zero mil increase bond. Sincerely, Dr. Lyndon Moore, Superintendent, Montrose Community Schools. So there's a community announcement. We have a few things. I want to thank our sound engineers up in the booth, Jamie Kitts, Mike Johnson, thank you. Just have a tough job trying to follow me and kind of how I, might move things around a little bit. I'd also, want to state none of this is possible, without the committee. So I want to thank Brenda Woodward, Kevin Briggs, Chrissy Emmendorfer, Coetta, Adams, and Dennis Reinhardt. So big round of applause for our committee. I want to thank the Montrose administration. We get to use these facilities. They're very supportive of this, and certainly without the administration and the folks here in Montrose High School and school system, I should say, they really make this thing work for us. So let's big round of applause. Lastly, just want to thank the good people of Montrose. I want to thank the people of the community, for your support, your leadership, for everything that you've meant. Everybody here is part of the fabric. Everybody here is a fiber that is part of the fabric of this community and has made contributions. And we have amazing people that have come out of a small town that we can feel very, very proud of. And certainly they're guideposts, they're leaders, they're people that we can look to and say, you can come from a small community. You can work on a farm in this community. You can work in a shop. You can be on a baseball team, a softball team, a member of band, on the student council, and you can go anywhere in this world. So thanks to you, the community. We're going to have a reception in the lobby. I'd like to ask all the inductees and their families to come down to the stage. We're going to take pictures here in front of the banners that you see up front. And if folks want to go to the lobby, have some refreshments, we'll spend 15, 20 minutes taking pictures, and then we'll all meet you out